Okay, so I've got the light under the Jeep now, so hopefully you guys can see the crack a little better in that transfer case input right there. So right here. So what I'm going to do first is I want to drop the transfer case before I really start the swap so I can look at it and do a fair assessment. So I've got this jacked up. You probably don't need the one under the oil pan. You probably just want to put a jack stand right under the transmission. And then we're going to go about, probably the first thing to do is we want to remove these drive shafts. So those are 8mm bolts on the caps that hold the bearings in place. And then this skid plate is 18mm bolts. There are 3 on each side. And I'm not exactly sure how to actually get the drive shaft out of the transfer case, because on mine it was a slip yoke and I could just pull it out. But we'll figure it out. Okay, now we're looking at the rear. So I already disconnected those 8mm bolts for the yoke on the rear Dana 44. And so now up here, this fixed yoke double cardan joint on the rear of the transfer case is 15mm, and there should be 4 bolts, and then this whole thing should pop out. Still haven't figured out the front yet. I forgot to mention there were some 1/2-inch nuts on the transmission mount that comes right through the skid pan. And I'm on my last 2 bolts, and just get under it when you drop the whole skid pan because it's heavy. It's probably like, I don't know, 100 pounds. Oh, actually I just realized first we got to disconnect at least the lines on this pump. See how tight they are. We'll do that real quick. So as you can see, we've got the skid plate off. So the locker pump actually had 4 bolts that they were like the threads for them were built into the skid plate. They're 13mm. They come off real easy. And then we've got these 4 plugs. Each differential must each have one for a switch and one to activate the pump. There's 2 wires coming out of each plug. So we're going to disconnect those, and then as you can see there are the actual hose lines here, which we're going to gently pry off with a flathead, and then we should be able to take the whole locker out. Just try and I'm going to take a picture, take a mental note so I can remember which plug goes where, so that way I don't get them messed up when I'm trying to redo it. What I did here when I was disconnecting the pumps, I labeled each of these plugs, you see, with some tape and a Sharpie, because I'm probably not going to, this is probably going to be one of the last things I do is to wire this pump back up in my Jeep, and I'm probably going to forget what goes to what. So each one, like there are 2 2s, 1 1s, and it reads left to right. So that'll make it easier, and then I'll show you here are the pumps. So they're originally mounted under the skid plate. I'm going to probably mount them under the driver's seat. And here's where the things were. Some of them just had those weird punch attachments that go in, and then the hoses I just slid off. Pretty easy. So this is the transmission mount. So there are just 4 15mm bolts here, and now might also be a good time to replace the actual bushing here, which just has another 4 15mm bolts. I'm going to wait because I might be doing a tummy tuck and might want a low profile one. I haven't really done enough research yet to know. But in the meantime, I'm probably just going to reinstall this. And then there's right here is just the exhaust hanger. You'll just slide it off the exhaust. Hopefully it's not too rusty. Mine came out pretty easily. Okay, so I bought this $100 Harbor Freight transmission jack. I've already got it under the transfer case. But a couple more things. There's a plug right up there by the shift linkage, probably to senses when it's in 4-wheel drive. And then there's also a plug here. I'll come around to the back. Right there, it's the speedometer sensor, so I just unplugged it right up there. Hopefully you guys can see that. And so now we're going to work on this shift linkage. That should be the last thing before we start removing the transfer case. So there are 4 bolts that hold this mount right here, and you're going to have to pull some carpet up. So they're right here. There are 4 of them. They're 10mm. Just pulled down the carpet a little bit, and that gave easy access. Okay, so I had to lower it a bit more to get access, but so there are 6 of these bolts, 3 on each side. They're 9/16. They're really nuts on studs. The studs come out of the transmission. You're going to need to remove 2 anyway just to get the linkage free. Like the linkage goes over these studs here. But yeah, I used a combination of a 9/16 open end box end wrench and then a universal joint I was able to get to some of them with. But I finally got it off. I have my ratchet strap from the jack stand over the transmission, and so it should just be a matter of wiggling it free now. It's probably going to be a pain, but I don't know, we'll see. I'm going to try and like kick it towards the rear of the Jeep, and maybe it'll free up, or I could try and pry here. I don't know, we'll see. Okay, so a couple things. So I obviously got the transfer case out. There were 2 zip ties that were holding the wire loom that I had to cut here and here. That plug that I unplugged earlier was actually something for the transmission. There was another one that senses when it's in 4-wheel drive. So just one more plug. And then I finally got the linkage out up here at the top. All I did was use needle nose pliers and put them right there and kind of pry it out. Yeah, it's not too hard. And then it actually came out super easily. This thing's pretty heavy. It would have been easier if I took the drive shafts off first, probably. I'm going to do that now. I didn't realize that there's some more 8mm back here that I'm going to use to get out the front drive shaft, and then the rear. I think I already told you guys the size. I think they're like 15mm. And then I'm going to pull those out. And then, so this is the damage that I was talking about. Oh wait, real quick, back to the drive shafts. So since I'm putting them in my TJ, they're not gonna fit because this is an LJ. So like, I think the front drive shaft might be the same. I did already destroy one of the needle bearings on it, but the rear drive shaft is definitely gonna be too long. Maybe it would work because I have a lift. I don't know, in this Jeep stock. We'll see, but either way I was gonna get some Tom Woods custom-made drive shafts. So once I popped in the transfer case and the differentials, and I was gonna take measurements yoke to yoke and get Tom Woods custom drive shafts. But anyway, okay, back to this. So we can see, so this vehicle was in an accident, and obviously it cracked just this front plate. Luckily it is just this front plate. I'm hoping none of the internals are damaged, but you guys shouldn't have to. But I'm gonna take this plate off and just check the inside. I'm gonna have to replace the plate anyway, but it doesn't seem like the cracks went anywhere past this seam, so that's good. Oh, and one other thing I forgot to mention, there's a vent hose here that I just pried off with some vice grips. But the damage seems pretty much contained to this face, so hoping for the best. So I got the drive shafts off. I would highly recommend removing these while it's still in the vehicle. I had to like put this extension through, like, here it is, through like this part of the U-joint and like step on it and hold it to stop it from rotating while I got these off. Yeah, definitely do that while it's in there. And now this part probably shouldn't apply to most of you, but I'm going to pull whatever this is. We're going to work on removing the transmission. So first we're going to pry up this cover. Right here it just clips on. And then there should be like a little sleeve and a T55 Torx bolt to remove the shifter from the below. Right, here's what I mean about the cover, and it's a T45 actually. I'm going to remove the slave cylinder here. It's just these 2 half-inch bolts with a deep well socket. I did the other part before, so I didn't have to reach these bolts holding the bottom of the shifter because I don't know what they are yet. So I removed the shifter from the top, and then I should just be able to drop the whole thing. To the passenger side of the transmission now, there's another plug we got unplugged. Not really sure what it's for, to be honest. And then we have the starter, which has, as far as I can tell right now, just 2 they're 15mm bolts. One there, and then another one. You see my socket already on it. I'm going to go at it from the bottom. The passenger side of the transmission, there's one 15mm, slightly smaller bolt with no nut on the end. And I had to use a ridiculous extension like you see here to get at it. The jack lowered all the way, there's this E12 external Torx type of bolt. You can see the socket and the bolt. That is really hard to get to. It's like way up there, that mounting bracket for the vent hose. I had to lower the jack all the way to get at it, but it should be good. There was another one of these E12 external Torx bolts. I want to call them nightmare bolts. Closer to the passenger side all the way over. I had to get at this again with a super long extension with the thing all the way down. What a pain. So the LUK clutch kit comes with a new throwout bearing, but it's plastic. So I bought another one that was like $30 to go with it, that's metal. But this whole piece just pulls out. The throwout bearing literally just has clips that attach it to the fork. And then I'm also just replacing this pivot ball clip. It was literally $1 and I got a new clip, it's right there. And this just comes off and swaps. We're going to go about removing the flywheel clutch pilot bearing and then putting in all new ones. So we've got these half-inch bolts. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them around, and I think that's all that holds it in. So remove those 6 bolts, and here we're at the flywheel. I'm going to try and sand it first, see if I can make it pretty. Otherwise I might get a whole new one, we'll see. I got some 120 grit sandpaper. Just a little comparison of the old versus the new clutch. Just make sure that, see, this one says flywheel side, this says flywheel side right here. Make sure you don't put it in the wrong way. But this clutch definitely had a lot more life on it, I think. And we're going to go ahead and remove the pilot bearing in a second. Okay, so I'm about to try the bread trick for getting that pilot bearing, which is right in the center there, out. So basically I found a socket size that fits perfectly in it, which is a 13 millimeter. And so I've got it here, and I've got some potato buns because I figured they're thicker, and I'm going to put a little bit of bread in the hole at a time and keep hammering it in, and eventually that should pop right out. After about 2 hours of frustration with bread and PB Blaster, all I have to say is fuck that method. Do not do it. Go to AutoZone, rent one of these for free. I got this out in about 2 seconds after struggling with that bread method for over 2 hours. All you do is this little piece, you get it as close together as possible, you put it in the hole, you screw it right here so it separates them just enough to grab the back end of it, you screw in the slide hammer, 3 hits and this stupid thing was out. So now I'm just going to go clean out my hole and then tap in the new one. To tap in the new one, I'm going to get a socket that's just the same diameter as the pilot bearing and just tap it into place gently with a mallet. Plastic hammer would be even better. I might coat the outside of it a little bit with grease, and also just notice there is a right and a wrong way with these. There's kind of like a seal. I don't know how well you guys can see that. That should be pointing towards the rear of the vehicle. So you use this little tool you see that's centered right there on everything to hold the clutch in place. Well, then you put the what's it called, pressure plate on with this this fork. So once you do that, you start putting the bolts on, do them in a crisscross pattern to 38 foot-pounds, and then that's it for the new clutch. And then there's some grease that we're going to put on the input splines on the clutch. I highly recommend taking the transfer case off to dismount and mount the transmission. Just makes the world a lot easier. So some tricks: I use the jack in the front to help angle it. You can do that with your jack stand too, but not as much. And then lastly, big help is rotating it back here. So if the gears don't line up exactly, you can turn this a little bit and to line them up and be able to push it all the way in. And you'll know when it's in because it will get harder to turn because you'll be rotating the crankshaft and the pistons and everything once it's locked in. And then we just reinstall all the bolts. In case you guys are interested, here's the face of a NP241 and here are the planetary gears. In order to separate them, there's a snap ring right here, which can only be accessed through the front right here, and there's a seal. So here's the one, you have to kind of destroy it to get it out. So I got a new seal, I just got a new snap ring, and I just bought snap ring pliers for the first time from AutoZone. We're about to mess with this and then should be good to go finally. So installing the transfer case can be a huge pain up there because of the angle. So what I did was I took off all the studs. So I used a vice grip and took them all out. It might be easier to show you on the other transfer case face. So I basically took out all these studs and then mounted it just with the shaft and then threaded the studs back through. Made it a lot simpler. You guys can see I'm putting in a cable shifter. It's from Savvy. It's pretty self-explanatory. Like you go over the same nuts the old shifter came off, the same body bolts, and you just line it up and just make sure you know you're in like 2-wheel or 4-low. You can test that just by like spinning the drivetrain if you need with it in gear, and you'll know.